Can you hear me, Professor Russell?
Yes, Professor.
Okay.
We are just giving time to the attendants enter.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It's going to be a big session, so nevertheless, I'm going to kick off the session. Thank you very much for the audience for coming. Today, we have Professor Uysal. I have the honor to present him in a very brief mode. Otherwise, I will take at least 30 minutes to present him properly. Professor authorized that I be very spontaneous and short. Today we have a very special session about the fundamentals of tourism. It's important. The scope of these sessions is Tourism Management and Computing Technology International Conference. It will be held between the 2nd and the 7th of November of this year, in person or online. And in that scope, we are promoting some online seminars with the participation of proeminent scholars like Professor Uysal. In the name of the organizing committee, I would thank deeply Professor Uysal for his time to be with us and to share this seminar with all of you. Thank you very much for coming, and hopefully you enjoy the session. Professor, if you want, you can share your presentation now. Thank you. In terms of organization, we will have roughly 35 to 40 minutes of presentation, followed by a Q&A session with about 10 to 15 minutes. And at the end of that Q&A, we will have the link so you can ask for your certificate that we will send the organization, we will send briefly, okay? So thank you very much again. Professor, if you want share your presentation. Thank you.
Can you see the presentation?
No, we are seeing your window. Thank you.
Okay. Just a minute. Just give me a second.
Okay. So we are now seeing the presentation, Professor. Whenever you want. Thank you. Yes, perfect. Professor Uysal, can you hear me? So we are seeing the presentation.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, Professor, we are hearing you perfectly.
All right. Thank you so much. I don't know what's going on, but okay, we're here. Let me go back to my presentation. Can you see the presentation as well?
Yes, please put in the full screen mode, please, the presentation.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Are we good now?
We will be.
Okay.
Yes, now
All right.
we are. Now we are.
Okay.
The
Okay.
floor is yours.
So
Thank you.
I'm so happy to be with you. Thank you so much for inviting me to do this seminar with you. And good afternoon, everyone who is joining us. And the title of my seminar is Theories and Models in Tourism and Hospitality Research. I think I'm just reflecting back on what I have been doing for the past 20 some years, but I like to just go over the presentation first briefly. So part one is going to focus on philosophy matters in research. This is site information. Once I talk about that little bit, then I can move into understanding theory and then focus on key tourism and hospitality theories, some selected ones with some examples, and then maybe focus on destination development and management theories, again, some selected ones, and finally look at some other models in tourism and hospitality. So I use theories and models. I may also bring the concept of approaches in my discussions. So then I will end my seminar with some reasons why theories are so important and they matter. So at the
Just a second,
outset,
Professor. Sorry
sure,
to interrupt you. If it's possible, you can turn on your camera, please. If it's possible. Thank you.
turn on my camera is not on,
No, no, not yet.
not yet. Okay. Can you see it now?
Yes, perfectly. Thank you very much, Professor.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
All right. So going back to our presentation again. Okay, so I guess the idea here is that at the outset, it would be really nice to look at philosophy, why that is so important within the context of theories and models. When I did my PhD, I remember early on in the States, we had to take at least two full classes about philosophy to kind of set the stage to understand theories and models in our academic professional, let's say, program. So the idea is, can you see the presentation slides?
Yes, perfectly, Professor. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So the idea is why? Because philosophers clarify assumptions and integrate methodologies and examine ethical dimensions of inquiry. In a way, it just allows us to develop that mindset about, let's say, conducting research. And then at the same time, philosophy does matter. Philosophers usually, study, let's say, solid logical foundations of, let's say, what's happening around us. And at the same time, this kind of, let's say, classes, concepts, and let's say approaches help us transform, let's say, raw data collection into meaningful, responsible knowledge production. Therefore, two concepts become so important. One is, of course, ontology, and the other will be epistemology. And then these two terms are really philosophical foundations of research because they do touch on everything we do in terms of research design. So ontology and epistemology underpin all research design. So they are not just simply abstract concept or luxuries, but they are practical necessities for any scholarly inquiry. Therefore, in order to shape what we study, we have to understand the nature of our ontology, meaning the approach and the source of knowledge epistemology. So these stances, in a way they are stand, determine what researchers examine, what we examine, and how we examine what we examine, and ultimately they count as valid knowledge in the end. So in this field, hospitality and tourism, philosophical choices shape how we understand destinations, guests, host-guest relations, and lived experiences. Uh, So I think just to briefly summarize this little section, site info, ontology, as you all know, concerns the nature of reality. So, and what exists in the world. So this is important. In tourism research, ontology poses a critical question. Does tourism exist as an objective phenomenon, measurable, consistent across contexts? Or is it just socially constructed? So in a way, a lot of things we see around us as questions and issues in a given destination space, could also have perceived, reality of what there is out there. So the ontological position a researcher holds will fundamentally determine how they frame their research questions, interpret their findings. Therefore, the central ontological question will be, is a destination a fixed geographic cultural entity, or does it only exist as a meaning constructed by tourist host industries together? So why it matters? Because it does matter, because that kind of understanding will determine whether we count arrivals, map infrastructure, model economic flows, or whether you interpret stories, meanings, and lived experiences. In a way, this concept of ontology allows us to really just see our stand and how we look at the issues that may surround, let's say, tourism phenomenon as a socioeconomic force. So therefore, these two core positions exist under the concept of ontological aspects. So one is realism, okay, the other constructivism. So reality exists independent of human perception. So tourist arrivals, hotel occupancy rates, economic impact are objective phenomena that can be measured, compared, and generalized across contexts. There's no question about this. But at the same time, reality is created, I guess, through human interaction, interpretation, how we look at this, let's say, different phenomena that may surround, let's say, host-guest interactions in a given, let's say, destinations or place. So the meaning of a dream vacation, for example, may differ profoundly for every traveler, every person who is involved in the production and consumption system of tourism activities. So uh, then that epistemology, on the other hand, just simply asks the simple question, how do we know what we know? I think this is really core question. What counts as valid knowledge? Therefore, the epistemological stand is a researcher that directly determines their choice of research methods, from large-scale surveys to in-depth ethnographic field work. So meaning we use so many different approaches, methods to understand what we like to discover. So the central concern is that the relationship between the researcher and researched, can the researcher stand apart from the subject, or are they inevitably part of it? So how you maintain your objectivity in that process. So therefore, three major epistemological approaches can be used, but you can also have a hybrid positivism. Some even just call this neological positivism. So knowledge through observation, measurement. For example, service quality predicts satisfaction across a sample of 1,000 tourists. Modeling through structural equation modeling. Interpretarism is more of understanding lived experiences. Example will be exploring the spiritual meaning of pilgrimage to Mecca through in-depth interviews or ethnographic observation. Then you also have another approach where you can use to collect, generate data, critical theory, which focuses on challenge power inequalities. For example, a good question would be, does mass tourism benefit multinational corporations while systematically marginalizing local host communities? So therefore, how do we know what we know? I think can be accomplished through those different approaches under the concept of epistemology. So I'll just skip this thing and move into now some other areas. So in terms of takeaways for researchers. So what is reality? This is important. Reality at some time could be mediated or moderated by how we perceive a lot of things around us. So how do we know reality? This is epistemological position, which determines the methods, instruments, standards of evidence you employ, meaning how are you going to arrive at that conclusion or generate the knowledge that is hoped to be generated. So in terms of, let's say, how host and guests interact to create experience, care, comfort, value, delivering context in which these philosophical choices play out. So your ontology put on this will really influence the direction you're taking. So in terms of the philosophical foundation, together these two, ontology and epistemology, form the coherent foundation that shapes how studies are designed, conducted, and interpreted. Therefore, explicit philosophical positioning elevates research from descriptive reporting to rigorous, theoretically grounded scholarly contribution. Because in our typical daily conversation research environment, we seem to loosely, look at the concept of epistemology, ontology, but they are the foundational, philosophical foundations of our research, which give us the direction and guidance to move forward so that we can just, develop, generate knowledge as objectively as we can. Now, let's just, that being said at the outset, in a rush way, now we can focus on theory. So I think everybody has their own definition of theory, but a theory is a systematic, well-established explanation of a given phenomenon. So this can be based on evidence-based, meaning supported by research, observation, not mere speculation, and logical, internally consistent and coherent in its reasoning and its flow. At the same time, of course, based on, let's say, if what we have, what we examine is testable, and in the end, it can be verified, applied across different contexts, meaning it can be generalizable. So, simply a theory is a systematic, well-substantiated explanation of a given phenomenon based on certain characteristics. Therefore, it's systematic, it's explanatory, meaning it explains why and how something happens. It's predictive in a way, can anticipate future outcomes or behaviors. Falsifiable can potentially be proven wrong either way, and then has the potential to be generalizable beyond a single case or context issue. So these are typical characteristics of theory. So I'm going to come back to some of these related concepts. I'll skip at this time, but let me just focus on something else we don't really typically think about. Okay, I wanted to start this conversation actually, what is not a theory, but this is kind of a reverse logic, but it's important to recognize what does not qualify as a theory. Many concepts are mistakenly labeled as theories in everyday discourse and discussion. For example, when you look at visitor arrivals, GDP figures, these are just simple facts. They are not theories. If you look at visa regulation, marketing campaigns, these are just simply policy-related issues. So like laws that may describe what happens, but not necessarily why, because why element has to be part of theory. And then models, simplified representations of reality, not full explanations. So models are not necessarily theories. And then best practices are not also theories. Maybe they may be proving, let's say, practices that yield, let's say, higher effectiveness and better results. So maybe industry use some of these best practices to lead or guide themselves to develop more effective approaches. So a theory must be tested, evidence-based, explanatory, not merely descriptive or prescriptive in nature. So sometimes we talk about this, types of theories as we talk about levels of knowledge, like being, let's say, descriptive, and we move it to correlational, then explanatory, high level, like causational type research. But usually scientists talk about these grand theories, like these are broad, overarching approaches. For example, modernization. How do you explain that? That's a very general aggregate type approach to understand, what's going on, globally. Then you may have middle range theories, like a classic example, maybe not necessarily a theory, but approach. Butler's tourism area life cycle, helps us explain, let's say, how destinations go to different levels of development. And then maybe more substantive theories that could be narrow and context specific. A theory explaining tourist behavior in a given destination, context, etc. So there are levels of theoretical abstractions in a way, and then from grand to all the way to more specific, localized, context-oriented, theories. But the question would be then how theories are developed. I know we have tons of books out there, but I think one of my favorite books that I use in my particular class with PhDs is Swanson and Charmak. theory building and applied disciplines, given the nature of the business we're in, which is, I call it applied discipline. So you go through different, steps, to really develop a theory. Typically, you start with observation, whether you follow deductive or inductive reasoning to arrive at that, but generate information, then maybe depending upon the approach you took, and then you formulate or develop hypothesis. This could be either inductive or deductive, depending upon your approach. But in the end, generated data, okay, and then used to kind of test and find support for hypothesis. In the end, testing it. Therefore, theory development is a rigorous interactive process, we all know, and this so-called different stages built on the previous, moving from initial observation through empirical testing and eventual acceptance and practical application by our academic community. So it's a rigorous cycle. So functions of theory and tourism hospitality, just briefly, if I touch on this thing, first of all, it explains, a given phenomenon or a set of phenomena. But an example would be, some of you may know of this push and pull theory explains why people travel, so based on their personality traits or some other characteristics. So at the same time, okay, theories, guide our research. A good example would be social exchange theory, which frames resident attitude studies, if you want to understand based on the perceived, benefits and cost of the transaction in nature, and how would that affect, one's attitude over time. And not necessarily linear, attitude change, could be, simultaneous attitude change. So again, of course, theories also help us, let's say, predict, future behavior. For example, tourism area life cycle helps forecast destination stagnation based on so many indicators and changes, whether they are dependent variables or independent indicators, etc. At the same time, more importantly, I guess, they inform policy and decision-making process. For example, trying to understand, let's say, carrying capacity, right? That theory will help us understand how we manage a load or, destination in terms of different types of capacity concept, whether social, psychological, and or limits of acceptable use, etc. So at the same time, I guess, theory functions as a way of building knowledge. If you think about serve qual, how that depends, service quality understanding for us. Okay. Now, we all know that we come from being an applied field that simply, tells us, and we always have heard this discourse over the years that, tourism hospitality is more of a, a multidisciplinary field. But I think most of our so-called functional theories that we use, are grounded in classic, disciplines such as economics. Think about like leakage theory, dependency theory, growth pole theory, etc. And in psychology, we think about, let's say, reason for travel, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, or push-pull, flow theory, etc. And then you think about sociology, some of this community-based destination management theories, social exchange theory, Dux's Iridex model, place attachment, etc., grounded in sociology. And then, of course, geography, think about core preferred theory, cluster theory. And then again, you think about management, where we got most of our theories being developed, I guess, in general, share stakeholder theory, circle, and then competitiveness theory, etc. Then again, carrying capacity, sustainable development, maybe they come from different disciplines, including environmental science, etc. So tourism theory draws from a rich area of academic disciplines, each contributing unique theoretical lenses, there's no question. So in a typical study, there's no single approach, or single theory, okay, to use. We usually use a multiple set of theories collectively to understand or shed light on the phenomenon we're examining, because that is needed. So key tourism and hospitality theories. Now, I can take a look at some of the selected ones, not necessarily in a schematic way, but just as an example at random. I think typically I refer to this thing, looking at Butler's tourism area life cycle, right? You kind of know the stages of development over time. As places like products, go through different physical changes. As the places go through different physical changes, you will also see, behavior responses to these physical changes. Therefore, you could really just understand and then maybe predict and change the course of that development. So therefore, using that kind of, let's say, approach or theory will help you understand, let's say, how you can manage a given place at the same time, how you can develop certain behavior responses or strategies. A good example, Boracay, Philippines, rapid development led to stagnation. The government closed it in 2018 for rejuvenation, for example. That was kind of the decision they made. Bali, Indonesia, currently at the consolidation, stagnation stage, promoting government and innovation. So it's like a way of, helping us. So if you look at push and pull theory and plug psychographics, so here you may think about, let's say, your stakeholders. If you look at, some of these theories and concepts from the perspective of managing destination versus some of these theories and concepts from the perspective of, let's say, consumers, your visitors, or you can look at the same issue from the perspective of different stakeholders, providers, government entities. I guess that's what I said. This kind of, theories are a little bit chaotic in a way, but I think they can be grouped under, different perspectives and stakeholders. We all know push and pull, for example, tourists are pushed by internal motives, escape, relaxation, pulled by destination attributes. Some even question if destination attributes are true motivations, but maybe pull factors are true motivation. Most of you, again, are familiar with Plager's psychographic theory based on personality, which he did it with a simple question, why, individuals don't fly. So based on that study, he was able to kind of categorize, America's on that continuum of personality. On one hand, he had allocentric, on the other hand, psychocentric, meaning prefer familiar places, whereas allocentric individuals are, the ones that favor, let's say, adventure and then therefore prefer places that are less known. So I think it helps us to understand behavior and how these results can be, used in different promotional strategies, etc. So an example, a backpacker in rural Vietnam, allocentric, versus a package tourist at Disney World, a psychocentric, behavior or traveler, which, selects a place that gives a sense of familiarity and comfort. So, and in terms of destination management, and remember Doxy's Iridex index or social exchange theory, these are very typical, but implies that there is this linear development over time. At the beginning, euphoric feeling about, tourism and tourists from outsiders as the place becomes more established, and then some, residents may develop certain attitude, which could be labeled as apathy, tourism taken for granted, and maybe the presence of others, somehow influences your sense of well-being and comfort. Then there is level of annoyance taking place in the end, maybe depending upon what happens, as we see this in Barcelona, for example. People may develop even antagonism towards the presence of others. So this simply, is a theoretical framework or theory that helps us understand the sentiments or attitudes that people may have over time, maybe in reality, these things may happen simultaneously, not necessarily, linearly. Again, the most commonly used one social exchange theory based on, expected benefits and transactions. So residents support tourism when perceived benefits, jobs, income outweigh costs, congestion, cultural erosion. This is a context issue. It may change depending on the level of development, etc. So again, in terms of like consumers, then we have serve quality theories, that goes back to the late 1980s by Parasurman and his team, started at Texas A&M. And then again, under the same realm, we have the expectancy disconfirmation theory that has really dominated, customer satisfaction study for a long time, and also moments of truth popularized by Carson, and then every customer staff interaction shapes overall quality perception, etc. So, and if you look at sustainability, tourism, and carrying capacity, then you have sustainable tourism theory. What's present is without compromising future generation ability to enjoy destinations. You can take this to regenerative concept as well, whether different types of capacity you're talking about, social, cultural, environmental, physical, and psychological. So a good example, Galapagos Islands strictly limits visitor numbers to protect its unique ecosystem. A model application of carrying capacity, or how you manage load. So the existence of this carrying capacity, limits of acceptable use, or adaptable management approach, all those, together, or usually interchangeably utilized, used to understand, let's say, load management or capacity management in a given destination. But the principles are the same in terms of theories, right? So the more the load, and the higher the impact negatively on the ecology or the destination system. So destination development and management theories, and then again, you can just identify a number of those, one of which is growth pole tourism concentrates in hubs and then stimulates surrounding areas. Cancun stimulated broader Yucatan region, or in Turkey, I'm looking at a place like Muğla that stimulates a lot of small towns, coastal towns like Marmaris and Bodrum in Turkey. So core preferred theory, grounded in geography, wealth concentrates in urban cores, rural preferences remain depending on the center. So, and dependency theory, which is typically utilized in tourism, some macro and islands or state destination. Developing nations become economically dependent on tourists from wealthier countries, like the rich north versus the poor south, where we have destinations and then which also depend on the existence of the North or richer nations. Okay, so stakeholder theory, destination competitiveness, then we have a number of those theories that have dominated, let's say, destination management. For example, effective DMOs must balance the interests of tourists, residents, business, government, NGOs. So that's just the premise of stakeholder theory. And then if you look at the 1990s, we had a number of scholars like Brent Ritchie and Jeff Crouch, who focus on competitiveness, which depend on core resources, supporting factors, destination management, and then qualifying determinants. So, and then, for example, just to show an example from Switzerland, which competes through natural beauty, safety infrastructure, strong DMO management. So combining this theoretical framework, competitiveness, and stakeholder, we can really shed light on the nature of, let's say, how Switzerland, promotes itself and functions, beautifully. Okay. So then we also have other theories like cluster theory, leakage theory, collaborative planning theory. Some of you may have used some of this. No need to get into the detail that much, but these are also examples of theories that are typically used and utilized in destination management and tourism. Now, I'm going to switch to gear a little bit because I was talking about theory and some examples, whether, from the perspective of visitors, destination management in a chaotic way. But now let's just think about a little bit so-called models, because anytime you talk about theories and models in tourism, people really may use some of this concept interchangeably, including approaches. A model, if you want to define a model, is a simplified representation of reality that shows relationship between variables, okay? So it is practical and visual, but does not fully explain causation the way a theory does. To me, that would be the major difference between a theory and model. Yet, it is always good to work with models so you can just create the boxes and variables and have those variables and boxes are interconnected and relate to each other. So going back to, again, initial simple definition, we had theory explains why. That is the key thing. Something happens. Social exchange is an example, right? Based on the transaction, expected benefits and costs, people have different attitude and reactions. A model simply will show how components relate, variables, often visually and practically derived from theory, but not necessarily implies causation at all, but may suggest some correlational, direction. On the other hand, approach, not specifically part of my seminar, but which would guide how to study or manage a phenomenon. So if you think about sustainable approach, that evokes some sort of sentiment in your way of thinking. So it's your approach. So you have to know the pillars of sustainability in terms of how you can look at certain issues. So therefore, even if they may complement each other, but none of this model or approach would be a theory at all, but yet they help us understand, let's say, a theoretical framework or help us understand, maybe move towards a theory. But they are more of, tools to use to move forward to support our theoretical foundation, etc. So, and in travel and tourism, some of you may have seen in different journals and places, and maybe the names we have here you may know, Leper, and then Milan Morrison, Claire Gunn, and these are the individuals in tourism. One is in planning, and the other is more of education perspective in tourism, and Milan Morrison more of a marketing perspective. They all focus on different tourism system models. Again, the models have some functions, origin destination models, demand side, like transportation, tourist attraction, how they are connected, like a fully functional tourism system. But the systems or system models do not necessarily imply causation. They may suggest direction, guidelines, and kind of a roadmap to understand a given phenomenon, but does not help us to understand, let's say, wise, but maybe it will help us what are the things that are taking place, happening, etc. So, and then in a simplest way, you look at the simplest model of tourism system, that would be an origin and destination, right? Origin represent the market and destination represent the supply side, and these demand and supply components interact to generate the consequences of travel tourism, positive or negative impacts over time, things like this. So, and then if you go back to, again, competitiveness service quality models, they are just similar in terms of, what they focus on. Cratch and Ritchie's competitiveness model. Later on, Larry Doyer and Kim also added a little bit more to it. And then ServQual, like identifying, gaps kind of in service delivery, etc. So in terms of tourist behavior and sustainability model, we have, let's say, way back, Matheson and Walls. They focus on, let's say, the social and economic environmental impacts of most of the social and environmental impacts of tourism, and they develop some sort of a model to understand, nature of impacts of tourism. And then most of us are probably hearing more about this or have been hearing more about this, is the concept of triple bottom line in terms of sustainability. So sustainability must balance people, planet, and profit. You see, this could be an approach, like a mindset. I will look at certain issues. Costa Rica's ecotourism model protects nature, planet, employs local guides, people, generates income, profit. So that's the kind of, approach. So, and then maybe a couple of things about quality of life theories and tourism, and that they are all grounded probably in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, travel motivation like the needs, from safety to self-actualization, meaning adventure, tourist climbing, average, six self-actualization, meaning we tend to do things that appeal to our higher order needs. If you look at subjective well-being, which is theorized, developed by Dinner at the University of Illinois, quality of life is measured by life satisfaction and the balance of positive versus negative emotions. And then you also have the objective, subjective quality of life indicators as part of this understanding, let's say, quality of life theories. But objective indicators alone may not necessarily tell us the big picture. How they are perceived or moderated will be also important, meaning the relative importance of these objective indicators is as important as the objective indicators themselves, because how much money is enough, or how high, let's say, the level of development is high or low. So those are the things, how they are perceived. But anyway, if in terms of resident quality of life and community well-being theories, I think typical resident quality of life theory, focuses on, let's say, resident attitudes, like how embracement, how well you can embrace some of this and how well you can tolerate the presence of others tourists, or whether you will adjust to a given place and withdraw from it. All that collectively, individually may influence, let's say, the well-being or quality of life residents. So I think that's just a narrow way of looking at it, but understanding part of resident quality of life. Community well-being theory simply just improve economic, social, cultural, and environmental well-being of host communities. You don't function or do tourism at the expense of losing local identity or impinging on the well-being of, let's say, residents, locals. And with that, also people focus on place attachment as part of this discourse. Residents with strong place identity feel tourism negative impacts more acutely. For example, long-term Kyoto residents and some destinations that tourists, even in Spain, have, locals kind of, show their reactions negatively, or in Venice towards the presence of others. So because they have a strong attachment to where they live, therefore they want to maintain their level of comfort, level of quality of life, whatever that is, and how it's perceived. So, but some of those theories do exist and independently, collectively help us understand, let's say, the sentiments of residents, visitors, and the interaction between residents and visitors. So, and then if we look at the literature and then a lot of other publications, different journals, you can see a number of theories that are utilized to understand, let's say, well-being from the perspective of visitors, consumers, or understanding quality of life from the perspective of residents, understanding well-being and quality of life from the perspective of providers like employees. So some of this in frame, if in the context of tourism, looking at the phases of a travel experience from pre-trip to travel to site, on-site experience, and then back home, and then a post-reflective phase of the travel experience. So even some of these earlier theories are grounded in leisure, for example, restorative experience theory, Kaplan and Kaplan. They were recreationists and leisure behaviorists, who talk about some of this early on. Some of us also know optimal experience occur when challenge and skills are perfectly balanced. And the flow theory, of course, very popular and commonly used. So I think one of the dominating theories in terms of tourism, studying tourism quality of life would be the spillover theory of quality of life, positive or negative spillover, bottom up or top down, so either way. So this theory suggests that experiences, moods, behaviors from one domain of life. This could be work life domain. This could be leisure life domain. This could be environmental life domain, etc. Transfer or spill over into other domains, such as family leisure, ultimately dictating your overall well-being and life satisfaction. So I think in a nutshell, it says that you simply drive your satisfaction, quality of life from a number of domains that exist in your living space, and each has some potential to contribute your sense of well-being. Anyway, those are just an example. Now, the key takeaway why theory matters. I think a theory is not a guess. It is a rigorously developed, evidence-supported explanation, tested, accepted by academic communities. So how travel improves traveler well-being, happiness, flow, and restoration, tourism quality of life. How tourism affects host communities' well-being, place attachment, and attitudes. So in a way, I think these concepts or propositional statements can be answered by utilizing, let's say, some appropriate set of theories, right? In tourism and hospitality, I think theories are essential tools for understanding behavior and managing destinations depending upon the level of development, and then even improving, the type of or quality of service we provide, and also at the same time providing, let's say, sustainable development for all this. So in summary, reasons. Theories matter. I think just to cap this thing, you all know this, or organizing knowledge. If nothing, a theory connects the different dots. Okay, we as researchers represent those dots, and so that once the dots are connected, you have a synergy effect, which will yield, much better, effective, let's say, information that could be of some help to practitioners or help in decision making and somehow improve the precision and effectiveness what we're doing. At the same time, I think theories explain underlying mechanisms, so they go beyond describing what is happening, but they help us understand why it is happening, which is most important. So, for example, instead of stating that work stress affects family life, spillover theory explains psychological behavioral mechanism, whys. Okay, so making predictions, one of those. Competence or I would say characteristic of theory, which allow us to predict future outcomes based on specific conditions and based on the connected maps of different dots, and then based on the synergy, then you will be able to have a little bit more information to predict, to understand, and then maybe short term, if it's not long term, let's say, possible outcomes. So guiding practice and intervention, I think this is the roadmap for policymakers and decision makers, extremely important. And then lastly, maybe driving future research. So it allows us to have a launch pad for new questions, because never-ending cycle of it, because the things change over time, the context change over time, the subject change over time, the goal change over time. Depending upon all these combinations, then we can ask the same questions, but we may get different answers over time. So I'm going to skip this thing, just some specific things like 10 reasons theories matter in the context of tourism and hospitality. I put it as an example. If needed, I will share my presentation with you interested people. I can send it to Professor Russell, and then you can get a copy of it, so I don't worry about it. Just to end this thing with some relevant books on tourism. In the past, I would say like maybe most recently we had 4 or 5 books that focus somehow on tourism theories and concept. And we did one of these. I was part of one of those recent ones, theories and models and tourism, where we had like 70 some entries, like some theories and models, and with an introductory chapter. So I guess some of the things that I'm saying are somehow embedded in that book. And then the way, I've been teaching this with my colleague Linda Lowry here at University of Massachusetts, we have a seminar where we focus on some of these things in detail, very detailed discussion. But I wanted to just share this sources as relevant books, and you may be familiar with some of this, but most of these books have sections and issues that focus on theories and in hospitality and tourism. I think if anything, we have this eclectic approach to issues in tourism, drawing on different fields, most classic fields where we utilize, let's say, certain behavioral theories, which is not under the domain in one particular discipline, but these are just theories that have much broader implication and applications. Therefore, we have been utilizing those. Just to give you a couple of examples, in terms of demand theories, I think we have made a long way in terms of tourism demand forecasting. We understand all the variables and dependent, independent, moderating, mediating variables, what impacts, let's say, tourism demand in a given destination. Similarly, we have also made great progress in terms of understanding why people travel, like the motivation frame or push and pull, however you look at it, or Stanley Pluggett's allocentric, psychocentric. There is a or we have a pool of information, very rich information on, let's say, understanding motivation and motivation theory in tourism, right? So you can even go back like 40, 50 years or so. So there are certain areas where we have really done good work and using, let's say, certain theories, understanding, let's say, certain tourism phenomena, as I said, demand for tourism, motivation for tourism, even just, the nature of quality service provided in tourism, for which we also have, good understanding. In terms of, let's say, places or areas that need a little bit more attention, like the concept of sustainability. It's more of an approach. And then even if we use a lot of theories, let's say under sustainability, you can say stakeholder theory, dependency theory, it's a context issue, but we don't have this well, clearly, let's say, defined areas of sustainability where we have made good progress. Most of the progress we have made is at the local level and then managing and then also benefiting locals, etc. Maybe some of the things we have in tourism as issues do matter at the local level more, and we make maybe better difference at the local level than we do at a more global national level, because a lot of things we do are so applied and context oriented. Therefore, anytime you deal with context oriented small scale issues, then the kind of definitions you have are functional. So we don't utilize this universally accepted definitions approaches as much, but we try to adapt and then contextualize and then just focus on the outcome if that would benefit a decision maker or a stakeholder, whether it be a tourist or elected government official, etc. So I think in that, what I am saying is that some of the models and approaches would be of more helpful than simply just trying to, have a theoretical foundation to drive, let's say, your examination, your understanding of what's going on in a typical destination or place. With that, I'll just end my presentation. Thank you.
Thank
Is
you
that
very
good to
much,
know?
Professor,
Yeah.
for your presentation. Was very insightful and very broad in terms of what are the foundations of the theory in tourism. I will give you some seconds so you can catch your breath. It was very intense, this presentation. And I would like to kick off the Q&A session with the elephant in the room. That is, uh, in the era of generative AI, what are the implications for tourism theory, benefits and threats, in your view?
I think some of you are in technology, and of course, we have regenerative AI and then machine learning classes here in our program as well, and there's so much focus and emphasis. My personal take on that is here, it's not gonna go away. So we have to know how we can use this AI tools, regenerative AI tools, others as well, like machine learning tools to help us in our, let's say, resolving issues and then also guiding us, into next phase of what we do in terms of establishing effectiveness and also efficiency, etc., etc. So I'm not going to talk about the benefits of all that, but I think it is so important and useful. This kind of technology allow us to mimic the real world better. I think it will help us reduce, let's say, errors in our research, right? It can also just help us through maybe synthetic data, real data, to mimic, to verify, some of the things we do, right? So I really think that in terms of theory development, it can help us to substantiate, verify, confirm some of the things we're doing. I think to me that area is important. Like we're talking about creating different scenarios or mimicking different scenarios, right? What is what is that thing? Twin digits type thing, like imitating, creating, and I think those things will become so important to verify, to substantiate some of the things we do, right? I think technology will help us. And then I'm not talking about simpler, adaptation, technology adaptation theory, that kind, but I think I'm pretty sure, there could be some other like theoretical framework that those of you will just come up with or develop, and then so that we will utilize, some of these tools in a way, systematic way that will contribute to what we're doing and substantiate or increase its usefulness and etc. So I think an example I can give you, we have a behavioral lab here, okay, in Eisenberg School of Management. Recently, we created a team of 4 people, 2 PhDs and a faculty member. And then that particular faculty member is specializing in regenerative AI. She's teaching an MBA, and PhD program, and also machine learning. So we created this project where we took our hospitality management barrier centers menu as the benchmark, and using AI, let's say, to enhance, let's say, the menu in terms of sustainability and health. In the area of sustainability, we added pretty much carbon footprint to every menu item. Okay, in terms of, let's say, health, we just looked at the calories, under different sections of the menu, very manageable menu. Okay, so we brought those two icons into that enhanced AI enhanced menu, like sustainability based menu, AI enhanced, health enhanced, or AI enhanced health menu oriented, then hybrid. And then we use this thing using, of course, iMotion. That's one of the key software in the behavioral lab, to see how people may react emotional, or if the icons, the enhanced menu could evoke certain feelings. So we capture all that, and we also did a conjoint measurement like design using Qualtrics at the end of this experimental design, which was a like a four-group Solomon modified design with 63 people, created at random, right? So in the end, we were able to demonstrate that if you do certain intervention, right, this is technology, and then we use the random forest to predict their behavior in the end. So we were able to show that the use of AI using behavioral lab, eye motion, like the skin tracing, the eye movement, etc., we would really just come up with a model that can really just help us to move forward with the so-called our benchmark menu. Without changing the menu, we can understand shuffling a lot of things, and maybe through nudges we can just help behavior change and become maybe a little bit more sustainable, health oriented with the same set of menu items. So this is a good example of how, let's say, use of adapting good technology, AI, machine learning, could really just help us move forward with something where we understand behavior better than we did before, because it just brings inner layers of behavior into that research setting, your emotional, reaction to a lot of things. So I just give that an example. Would this help us develop a theory in the end? It could, because looking at the process, how we just started this thing, how we combined a lot of things, in the end, we had a pretty powerful model, predictive model of behavior, where we didn't really do anything extra. Using the benchmark, we could really understand behavior much better, because this was not possible, let's say, 3 years ago, because we didn't have the lab, behavioral, other machine learning incorporated. To me, that's one example of it, just published in the International Journal of Hospitality Management. Actually, that particular one, I'm proud of the fact that I initiated the whole project in the beginning, and we did this thing just recently, and just wonderful. I do believe, like, I'm a very positive person. I believe the importance of, technology, AI, and I'm not just saying, oh, just it can do this right for me. It can help us, make things better for us. But the key thing would be to maintain the novelty. The novelty has to come from us as let's say researchers, because looking at the uniqueness of what we represent in the field of tourism and hospitality, once we have that thing, we can easily really move forward to really just generate a much better, stronger, applicable, something that has better practical implication for us and for decision making.
Excellent, Professor. Very comprehensive in terms of how can AI and large language models can help us to move forward. I have another question here that is in this alignment, that uh, what and how this new let me read the questions. What does genuine theoretical contributions look like versus 20 years ago? It seems much that the research nowadays extends application of a specific theory in a different context. Shouldn't the theory hold in different contexts?
I think good question. I like the underlying premise of the question. The theory should the principles of a theory should hold regardless of the place, the context. But I think the meaning may change. Let's say, let's just give an example of this. Okay, people have looked at, let's say, demand theories, and they know, okay, number of arrivals is a function of per capita income, let's say, exchange rate differentials, promotion expenditures, like some non-quantitative values, and you can say distance, etc. But here is the deal. We know for sure that there is a positive relationship between demand and income, per capita income, right? But in some places, the context can change this thing. For example, in a regional sense and in the Pacific, I've seen a study where the expected estimated coefficient, the sign of income coefficient was negative. Now, here is the question. Typically, the demand theory tells that there is a positive relationship between per capita income and number of trips you take or amount of you consume, etc. Well, if it is that, then the issue is maybe people in the region may find traveling to nearby places as inferior product. So you see that's one of the implications. So in the end, the concepts are same, but the kind of meaning they may take on, excuse me, right? The contexts are different. The variables they may the meaning that these variables take on could be target oriented, context oriented. So in a way, the questions, fundamental questions are the same. The guiding principle, the theoretical framework is the same, but the interpretation of it is context oriented. Therefore, because that would matter. A typical demand theory holds in place A, place B. The same thing is true. Let's say take the commonly used social exchange theory in destination management, right? How we look at this thing is based on the transaction, expected benefits versus expected cost. So maybe in some places this can reverse. So then you have to explain what may have happened in that place so that, there is this disruption or quality of life. Let's say we know that quality of life is always ultimate dependent variable, but in some places it can be antecedent. Maybe I am so happy with the place, I don't want to have more improvement in education, having, let's say, walking path or making the place more walkable, or I don't want to see more benches. We already are happy. So in that case, you have this top-down kind of quality of life approach. So how do you maintain this? This could be a different place. You go to an island, small nation, then nothing is there. In that case, it could be bottom-up type approach. So then you see, even if you're using the same theory, the context kind of helps us how you interpret this. The principles of the theory remains, but the context, I guess, the goal, the policy-based goal could really just reveal different meanings in terms of how you implement and
Yes.
understand the results or
Mhm.
outcome of it. I hope I make sense. A little bit, maybe
Yes,
confused.
totally,
Okay.
totally.
Yeah.
Um, Before I give the opportunity for our colleague can participate, I would like to ask you, we have this question. Do you think traditional tourism theories are sufficient today, or they should fundamentally refined using new analytical models?
I think the new analytical models will help us to have a more of a holistic approach to issues. Because remember, a lot of young scholars always get confused. They say, "I'm using okay this yeah X theory." Well, you don't test the theory itself. Usually, theories are guidelines. They help us understand the phenomenon. How many of us really literally tested, let's say, social exchange theory itself? But we just reveal evidence for the existence of the theory. So theories are also changing over time, reframing it, what may happen, right? they will change. But I think there is not one single theory approach to understand a phenomenon. It's always important that you have this holistic approach. Maybe in a typical research you created, you may utilize 3 or 4 different theories collectively will help you better than I'm just simply using X theory to explain this. I think maybe in the past that could have been possible given the complexity of today's world, the kind of tools available to us, level of advancement in research, we have come a long way, right? So it's very complicated. So we can even do like simultaneous, let's say, examination of issues. All that puts pressure on us as researchers to be more creative and utilize something that is more holistic, right? And maybe rather than just singular approach. But I think even non-linear in our research way of thinking, not necessarily linear. I think and I'm hoping that the advancement in data analytics and it will allow us to really do better with this non-linear way of thinking and analyzing data rather than just simply using linear. Similarly, for a long time, we look at one dependent variable, so many independent variables. But I think due to advancement in data analytics and AI uses, we will be able to do simultaneous examinations of our dependent variables, 10%, 25. Like we will be able to get away from making inferences based on averages only. A lot of times when we do survey research, whatever, we focus on averages. Inferences are made on averages. Who is this average Joe? Who is this average camper? Who is this average tourist? Averages may not give us as much practical implications in the business world. I think this new advancement in technology may allow us to really examine some of this simultaneously and see the interdependence of the factors, how they affect each other. That's why machine learning, will really help us in that. And then we didn't have the kind of tools we have now 10 years ago, 5 years ago. I think new generation of researchers could be much better equipped to really do the kind of, stronger analysis, data collection, but they have to be still careful how they can just kind of, streamline this so that the results are helpful.
Thank you very much, Professor. Now, our last question, I will give the stage to my colleague, Jaime Serra. I will ask you to open the microphone so he can address you directly the question. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Pleasure.
Karimo. Thank you. Are you hear me? Well?
Yes, well,
Yeah,
I do. Yeah, perfect.
A warm greet for Professor Muzzo. Thank you very much for this interesting talk. I want to congratulate my colleagues Karimo and João for these amazing webinars. They are our researchers from our research center, so I'm very happy to have you, Professor Muzzo, in this.
My pleasure.
In this section. So my question is a very philosophical question, because we are talking about theories and models, and probably we have a lot of PhD students or candidates to PhD students in our section. And the point is, starting from the end of the last answer, Professor Muzzo, and giving to this complexity of the today's world, and regarding the need to new approaches or to look at the whole theories, what is your opinion about the need to understand deeper than the merely theories, looked at the deeper of the concepts, the near concepts of the philosophers, in order to put in question the nowadays behavior of the tourist or the tourism itself? I give you an example. For instance, the students or the scholars that study tourist behavior, I think it's important to go back to Aristotle's Rhetorica, where this philosopher explained the meaning of anger, fear, motivation, happiness. And probably this would be very interesting to put new questions, to put new emphasis in the nowadays theories. Just to hear about this, Professor Muzzo. And I believe that for the new scholars, for the new students, it would be very interesting to see your view on this point. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Very comprehensive. I'm so happy that I can be with you all, and thank you, thank you. And let me just give you a little story. I think once Albert Einstein was giving an exam in his class, okay? And so one of the students raises his hand. He says, "Okay, Albert Einstein, these questions are the same as in last year's test." And Albert Einstein says, "I know, but the answers are different." Here is the issue here. I think asking fundamental good question, a question that will touch the inner layers of behavior, is fundamentally important. I think we need to learn how to ask good and hard questions, not necessarily common questions. And then going back to Aristotle time, ancient Greece, 2005 years ago, whatever, a lot of people had similar questions. That's one way, as Albert Einstein said. Now, the answers to those questions are significantly different than they were 10 years ago, 15, 20 years ago. What was true back in then may not necessarily be fully true in today's world. That's just given. We have seen this thing, whether the world is flat or not. A classic cliche example. Okay. I think what you're raising is, I agree completely with you. I think we have to first understand the nature of the business we represent. If this is the field of hospitality and tourism, there is so much uniqueness attached to it that defines us, right? I think for me, coming up with a good research question is first may require that we understand what we represent. What is the uniqueness of the field I represent? This could be in the context of tourist behavior. Is that the same as a typical like consumer behavior, or there is something here so unique, different, then I have to develop a sense for it, so that whatever the question I come up with for my thesis and project should allow me to understand the inner layers of behavior, not the surface layer, not the typical process, inner layers. That's what will make, let's say, my project unique and different. This will also suggest that, yes, we rely on theories that are commonly shared, developed in classic disciplines, but I shouldn't just simply think that they have this thing there, I'll bring it to my field. First, define the issue, what it is that you're focusing on, whatever that requires, takes you to, is where you should go and get and the other tools, whether it's a technological tool, a theoretical approach, or a model, whatever that is. But it should be determined by the nature of that deeper, the concept you're developing, the question, whatever that asks you to do, what we should do. Not because this is fashion. Remember, everybody wanted to use SEM, structural equation model, and all that. Well, just what is the question? So what in the end, right? At times, I also wonder about when we do these models, and I love to work with models initially and then support the connections by theoretical approaches, theories, right? We forget that a lot of good implications come from mediation, moderation. Because if you simply look at the outcome, one thing, it doesn't really give you much. But if you look at some of those moderation possibilities, mediation, those are the things that will allow us to touch the inner layers of behavior, to understand fully what's going on in the minds of, let's say, a tourist or resident, in terms of tourism development. I hope I'm helping us a little bit. I'm encouraging us to really focus on the uniqueness of what we represent first. And then that should just give us that hard question that will help us understand that deeper concept of what we represent. We are so unique because you can do basic finance. I understand that. We have economic theories, yes, but I think it's more important that to understand why this particular, phenomenon of tourism is something that is so unique, that requires so different questions, so fundamental questions, because it touches us to our not only physical well-being, emotional well-being. What we do also benefits a lot of people who are not necessarily part of the production consumption of tourism system. The elderly now has more space, open space, green space. That's as important as whether I understand, why Japanese, segmentation is important to us.
Thank you very much, Professor,
A pleasure.
for these unique insights. and for your participation in this seminar. In sake of time, I will end this Q&A session, and I briefly and shortly, my colleagues will share with you the details regarding your certificate. Once again, the TMCT conference acknowledge and thank you for your presence, Professor Uysal, and all the participants, remembering that the call for abstracts and chapters is open. So if you need anything from us, please go to the site and all the informations are there. See you soon. Have a nice holidays. We will come back in September. In the meanwhile, you can prepare your proposal and propose to the conference. Hopefully see you in November in the seminar, online or in person, but in September we will come back with more seminars. Thank you very much, Professor Uysal, for your insightful session, and wish you all a very good week and a very good weekend. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's been really a pleasure being with you, and then great question, great discussion. Sometimes going through formal presentation is not that important. Face-to-face chatting and talking, we learn from each other, and thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. Have a great weekend to you all as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. See you soon. Thank you very much to you both.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
What to pick to school?
Sorry.
Only, yes.